The massive doors of the Galactic Council arena slid open with a hiss that echoed through the circular chamber. Inside, thousands of alien representatives from across the known galaxy sat in tiered seats, their various forms creating a kaleidoscope of colors, shapes, and sizes. Some had tentacles, others had wings, and a few existed as clouds of luminescent gas contained in specialized suits. But all of them were focused on the circular platform in the center of the room. This wasn't supposed to be a spectacle. Earth's delegation had come here for peaceful talks, hoping to join the council as equals. They'd prepared presentations about human culture, technology, and diplomatic achievements. Ambassador Robert Hayes had spent 3 months memorizing the proper greetings in 40 different alien languages. Lieutenant Katie Morgan had helped organize cultural exchange programs. Everything was going according to plan. Until it wasn't. The Draxian Empire had other ideas about humanity's place in the galaxy. Their representative, Warlord Vexmore, had stood up during the third day of hearings and made a declaration that changed everything. According to Draxian tradition, any species claiming council membership must prove their worth through combat. It was an ancient rule rarely enforced, buried in centuries of council bylaws. But it was still technically valid. Now Katie stood at the edge of that arena platform, her standard-issue diplomatic uniform feeling utterly inadequate for what was about to happen. She was 32 years old, had a degree in interspecies communication, and her most intense physical activity was the occasional morning jog. This was not in her job description. Across the platform, Vexmore made his entrance. The Draxian warlord stood nearly 10 feet tall, his muscular frame covered in natural armor plating that gleamed under the arena lights. 4 arms, each corded with enhanced muscle tissue, flexed as he rolled his massive shoulders. His species had been bioengineering themselves for warfare for over 2,000 years. Every Draxian child was given genetic modifications at birth, trained in combat before they could walk, and surgically enhanced throughout their adolescence. Vexmore had won 347 arena matches. He'd never been defeated. He'd never even been seriously injured. Katie had taken a self-defense class in college. What? She dropped out after 2 weeks because it conflicted with her study schedule. The crowd's murmuring grew louder as Vexmore stepped onto the platform. Several species in the audience made sounds that the translation devices rendered as laughter. Others made gestures that clearly conveyed pity. A few of the more empathetic species looked away entirely, unable to watch what they assumed would be a quick and brutal defeat for the human. Ambassador Hayes had tried to stop this. He'd argued, pleaded, and searched for legal loopholes for 6 hours straight. But the Council's laws were clear, and the Draxians were insistent. If Earth wanted a seat at the table, someone had to step into that ring. The problem was that Earth's actual soldiers, the trained Marines and Special Forces operators, were all back on the diplomatic ship in orbit. Council protocols forbade armed military personnel from entering the Council chambers. The only humans physically present in the building were diplomats, scientists, and support staff. When Vexmore had issued his challenge, specifically demanding Earth's strongest warrior, Katie had looked around the delegation room. She'd seen scientists who spent their days in laboratories, translators who worked with language algorithms, and administrative staff who managed schedules and paperwork. Then she'd looked at Ambassador Hayes, a 63-year-old career diplomat with a bad knee, and made a decision. She'd volunteered. "This is foolish," Hayes had told her privately. "We can refuse. Find another way. Delay the vote. And look weak." Katie had replied. "Show them we're afraid? That's worse than losing. At least this way they'll know we tried." Now, standing in the arena, she wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. Vexmore began his prepared speech, his voice amplified by the arena sound system so every syllable reached the farthest seats. His words dripped with contempt. "Humans claim they deserve recognition among the stars," he announced, gesturing broadly to the assembled council. "But look at them. No natural armor. No enhanced strength. No warrior traditions worthy of respect. They are soft creatures from a soft world, playing at being equals to species who have conquered entire star systems." He turned his attention directly to Katie, and she felt the weight of his four-eyed stare. "You call yourself a diplomat, not a warrior. Yet you stand here as your species champion. This tells me everything I need to know about humanity's weakness." His mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "I will make this quick. 30 seconds, perhaps less. When you wake in your medical bay, tell your leaders that the galaxy has no room for fragile things." Katie took a slow breath. Her heart was hammering in her chest and her palms were sweaty. She wasn't strong. She wasn't trained. She wasn't ready. But she was here and she wasn't going to back down. The arena's automated system announced the beginning of the match. A countdown appeared on holographic displays around the chamber. 10 seconds until combat began. Katie shifted her weight, trying to remember anything useful from that self-defense class she'd barely attended years ago. Vexmore cracked his knuckles, all four hands producing a sound like breaking rocks. He smiled, revealing rows of sharp teeth designed for a carnivorous diet. 3 seconds. Katie's hands were shaking. 2 seconds. She forced herself to breathe. 1. The signal sounded and Vexmore moved. Vexmore moved like lightning. For something so massive he was impossibly fast. His bio-enhanced muscles launched him across the platform in a blur of motion that Katie's eyes could barely track. She had maybe half a second to react, and her body, untrained and purely running on instinct, did the worst possible thing. She froze. The impact came from her left side. Vexmore's lower right fist connected with her shoulder with the force of a small vehicle. The sound that filled the arena wasn't just the thud of the impact. It was the sharp, clear crack of bone breaking. Katie's collarbone snapped like a dry twig, and the force of the blow sent her spinning across the platform. She should have fallen. Every simulation the Council's medical staff had run suggested a human would be unconscious from that single strike. The Draxians were known for their precision. They could calculate exactly how much force to use to incapacitate without killing. It was supposed to be a clean, quick demonstration. Katie's body had other plans. She stumbled but stayed on her feet. The pain hit her nervous system like a tidal wave, but something strange was happening inside her brain. Deep in the primitive parts of her mind, the parts that remembered when humans were prey animals on an African savanna, alarm bells started ringing. Danger. Threat. Survive. Her adrenal glands, small organs sitting atop her kidneys, dumped their entire supply of adrenaline into her bloodstream in one massive surge. It was like someone had injected liquid lightning directly into her veins. Her heart rate doubled, then tripled. Blood vessels constricted everywhere except her major muscle groups. Her liver started pumping glucose into her system at emergency levels. Her pupils dilated, letting in more light. And most importantly, her pain receptors, completely overwhelmed by the signals from her shattered collarbone, started shutting down. Katie turned to face Vexmore. Her left arm was hanging at an odd angle, clearly broken. But her eyes had changed. The fear was still there, buried somewhere deep, but it was being drowned out by something older and far more dangerous. Pure survival instinct. In the audience, a Cerebrix researcher leaned forward in his seat. Fascinating, he whispered to his colleague. Look at her pupil dilation. And those micro-expressions. I believe we're witnessing a stress response. Vexmore noticed the change too, but he misinterpreted it. He'd seen prey animals go into shock before. This was just a dying creature's last confused moments. He moved in for what he assumed would be the finishing blow, a controlled strike to her solar plexus that would render her unconscious and end this embarrassing display. He was completely unprepared for what happened next. Katie's right fist came out of nowhere. There was no technique to it, no trained form or practiced movement. It was the kind of wild, desperate punch you'd see in a street fight, thrown by someone who'd never had a lesson in their life. But it was powered by muscles that had just unlocked every safety limiter evolution had installed in the human body. Under normal circumstances, human muscles are capable of generating far more force than they typically do. The brain deliberately limits their output because using full strength would tear tendons, shatter bones, and destroy joints. It's a safety feature like a governor on an engine. But when adrenaline floods the system, when the brain decides that survival is more important than long-term damage, those limiters come off. Katie's punch connected with Vexmore's armored chest plate with enough force to dent the biological armor. The warlord staggered backward, his four eyes widening in shock. That shouldn't have been possible. The force required to damage Draxian armor should have shattered every bone in a human hand. Katie's knuckles were definitely broken now. She just couldn't feel it yet. The crowd erupted into confused noise. Translators struggled to keep up with the dozens of languages being shouted simultaneously. In the human delegation box, Ambassador Hayes was on his feet, his face pale. He'd never seen anything like this. None of them had. Vexmore recovered quickly, his warrior training kicking in. He was hurt, actually hurt for the first time in decades. His pride stung worse than his chest. He came at Katie again, faster this time, angrier. He landed 2 more solid hits, one to her ribs and another to her jaw. 3 of Katie's ribs cracked. Her jaw should have dislocated. She barely seemed to notice. What Vexmore didn't understand, what none of the aliens in that arena could comprehend, was that every hit he landed was making things worse for him. Each impact triggered more adrenaline, more endorphins, more of humanity's cocktail of emergency chemicals. Katie's body was literally converting damage into fuel. Her vision had narrowed to a tunnel. She couldn't hear the crowd anymore. Couldn't hear Hayes shouting her name. Couldn't feel the broken bones or the blood running down her face from a cut above her eye. All she could see was the threat in front of her. All her body knew was that stopping meant dying, and something deep in her DNA refused to allow that. She came at Vex more like a wild animal. No strategy, no technique, just relentless forward pressure. She was slower than him, weaker under normal circumstances, and completely outmatched in every measurable way. But she wouldn't stop. Couldn't stop. Vexmore had trained for thousands of combat scenarios. He'd fought opponents stronger than him, faster than him, more skilled than him. But he'd never fought someone who simply refused to acknowledge they were beaten. Every warrior knew when to yield, when damage accumulation made victory impossible. Katie's body hadn't gotten that message. 7 minutes into the fight, Vexmore realized with dawning horror that he was in trouble. His enhanced endurance was legendary, but this human seemed to have no endurance limits at all. She was running on something beyond physical conditioning, beyond training, beyond anything in his experience. She was running on the same thing that had let her ancestors chase prey animals for 20 miles across scorching plains. The same thing that had let humans survive ice ages, predators, and planetary disasters. The same stubborn, insane refusal to quit that had carried humanity from caves to spaceships. 10 minutes in, Vexmore's breathing was labored. Katie's face was a mask of blood and bruises, but she was still coming forward. 12 minutes in, Vexmore made his final mistake. He tried to end it with one overwhelming strike, putting all his remaining strength into a four-armed combination that should have ended any fight. Katie walked through it like she didn't feel it at all, and drove her elbow into his throat. The warlord's eyes rolled back. His legs gave out. And for the first time in his 347 matches, Vexmore collapsed unconscious onto the arena floor. Katie stood over him, swaying slightly, her broken arm hanging loose. Then her knees buckled and darkness took her too. The first thing Vexmore became aware of was the sound. A steady beeping rhythm that seemed to come from somewhere far away, then gradually closer, until he realized it was monitoring his own heartbeat. The second thing was pain. Not the sharp, immediate pain of combat injury, but a deep, aching soreness that seemed to radiate from everywhere at once. He tried to open his eyes. The effort felt like lifting weights. When his vision finally cleared, he found himself staring at an unfamiliar ceiling, smooth and white, dotted with softly glowing medical equipment he didn't recognize. "Warlord Vexmore, please remain still. You've sustained significant injuries." The voice belonged to a Veltorian medic, one of the galaxy's most skilled healing species. Their three-fingered hands moved across a holographic display, checking his vital signs. Vexmore tried to speak, but his throat felt raw, damaged. He managed a raspy whisper. "How long?" 3 weeks, 2 days and 16 hours since your match," the medic replied, their tone professional but tinged with something that might have been amazement. "You've been in medically induced unconsciousness for most of that time. We needed to repair the damage before allowing your systems to reboot fully." 3 weeks. The words didn't make sense. Vexmore had never been unconscious for more than a few hours, even after his most brutal training exercises. He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain lanced through his torso like fire. "I wouldn't recommend movement yet," the medic said, gently pressing him back down. "You suffered 14 fractures across your skeletal structure, severe internal hemorrhaging, a punctured respiratory organ, and neural trauma that required nanite intervention to prevent permanent cognitive damage." The memories came flooding back then. The arena. The human. The fight that was supposed to last 30 seconds. Vexmore's pride, already wounded, took another hit as he recalled how it had ended. He, a champion of the Draxian Empire, had been knocked unconscious by an unenhanced human diplomat. The human female, he managed to ask. Did she survive? The medic's expression shifted to something Vexmore couldn't quite read. Lieutenant Morgan was treated and released 48 hours after the match. She suffered a fractured shoulder blade, broken collarbone, 3 cracked ribs, a minor jaw fracture, 2 broken fingers, and extensive soft tissue damage. The medic paused, consulting their notes. She refused advanced medical intervention beyond basic bone setting and pain management. According to her statement, and I quote, "I've had worse playing college rugby." Vexmore had no idea what college rugby was, but the implications were staggering. The human had sustained injuries that would hospitalize most species for weeks, and she'd walked out of the medical bay in 2 days. While he, genetically superior and surgically enhanced, had been unconscious for 3 weeks. Over the following days, as Vexmore slowly regained his strength, he began receiving visitors. First came his fellow Draxian officials, their disappointment barely concealed behind formal courtesy. Then came representatives from other council species, some offering sympathy, others barely hiding their amusement at seeing the mighty Draxian warrior brought low. But the most frequent visitor was an unexpected one. Dr. Richard Coleman, a human xenobiologist who'd been part of Earth's delegation. The human was older, maybe in his 50s, with graying hair and a kind face. He didn't come to gloat. Instead, he came to explain. "I want to show you something," Coleman said during one visit, pulling up a holographic display. "This is human physiology under normal conditions." The image showed a baseline human body, various systems highlighted in different colors. And this, another image appeared, is what happens during extreme stress. Vexmore watched as the second image transformed. Chemical compounds flooded through the bloodstream. Neural pathways lit up like fireworks. Muscle fibers reorganized themselves. It looked less like a biological response and more like a military mobilization. "We call it the fight-or-flight response," Coleman continued. "When a human perceives mortal danger, our bodies essentially override their own safety protocols. Adrenaline, cortisol, endorphins, norepinephrine, we dump a cocktail of chemicals into our system that would be considered performance-enhancing drugs by most species standards. Our bodies produce them naturally. But the pain," Vexmore said. "I broke her bones. Multiple times. She should have been incapacitated." Coleman nodded. "Under normal circumstances, yes. But when the fight-or-flight response is fully activated, our pain receptors can partially shut down. It's not that Katie didn't feel the pain, she did. Her body just decided that pain was less important than survival, so it deprioritized those signals." Another hologram appeared, this one showing human evolutionary history. Coleman walked Vexmore through it. Humans evolved on a planet they called Earth, a world with gravity 20% higher than galactic standard. A world where nearly everything was trying to eat them. No natural armor, no claws, no venom. Just endurance, intelligence, and the absolute refusal to quit. "We're persistence predators," Coleman explained. "Our ancestors would chase prey for hours, sometimes days, until the animal literally died of exhaustion. We can't outrun most animals in a sprint, but we can outlast almost anything over distance. That same biology applies to combat. We might not be the strongest or the fastest, but we just keep going." Vexmore thought about the fight. How Katie had kept coming forward no matter how many times he hit her. How her eyes had changed from fear to something primal and unstoppable. He'd thought he was fighting a diplomat. He'd actually been fighting millions of years of evolutionary survival instinct. "There's something else you should know," Coleman said, his tone becoming more serious. "Katie wasn't a soldier. She wasn't even particularly athletic by human standards. She was just an average person who refused to back down. On Earth, we have military personnel who train specifically for combat. Special forces operators who can fight for days without rest. Athletes who push their bodies to extremes we consider entertainment." The implications hung in the air like a weight. If an average human could do this, what could their actual warriors accomplish? "Why are you telling me this?" Vexmore asked. "We challenged your species. We humiliated you in front of the council." Coleman smiled, and it was a warm expression without malice. "Because you deserve to understand what happened. And because despite everything, Katie's first action after regaining consciousness wasn't celebration. It was crawling over to check if you were still breathing. She was worried about you." Vexmore fell silent. In Draxian culture, defeated enemies were shown respect but not compassion. The idea that this human, after being brutalized in combat, would prioritize her opponent's survival was incomprehensible. "Your species is strange," he finally said. "Yeah," Coleman agreed, still smiling. "We get that a lot. But here's the thing, Warlord. Humans don't want to be your enemies. We came here for peace, for cooperation, for friendship. The capacity for violence we showed in that arena? We'd much rather use it protecting our friends than fighting our enemies." As Coleman left that day, Vexmore lay back in his medical bed, staring at the ceiling. For 347 matches, he'd been undefeated. He'd thought he understood combat, understood strength, understood what it meant to be a warrior. One small human had taught him he understood nothing at all. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened exactly 1 week after Vexmore regained consciousness. The circular chamber was packed beyond capacity, with representatives standing in the aisles and overflow crowds watching from remote viewing stations across 100 worlds. What had started as a simple combat demonstration had evolved into something far more significant. The Council had a problem, and that problem was named humanity. Chancellor Throckmell, a towering insectoid being who'd led the Council for 40 standard years, called the Assembly to order. His compound eyes surveyed the chamber with an expression that translated to deep concern. "We are here to discuss the implications of recent events," he began, his mandibles clicking with each word. "The encounter between Warlord Vexmore and Lieutenant Katie Morgan has raised questions about humanity that demand answers. I've asked our research divisions to compile comprehensive reports. What they've discovered is troubling." The main holographic display flickered to life, showing footage that had been circulating through every comm channel in known space. The fight, played and replayed millions of times, analyzed frame by military strategists, scientists, and politicians across the galaxy. But it wasn't just the fight anymore. Intelligence agencies had been digging deeper into humanity, and the discoveries were piling up like evidence at a crime scene. A Cerebrix researcher, her crystalline form shimmering under the chamber lights, approached the central podium. "Honorable Council members, my team has spent the past week studying human biology, history, and behavior patterns. Our findings are unprecedented." The hologram shifted to show Earth, that small blue and green world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. Humans evolved on a planet with gravity 1.2 times galactic standard. This alone would make them unusually dense and strong by our measures. But that's merely the beginning. Another image appeared, showing Earth's surface temperature maps. Their planet experiences extreme temperature variations. Humans comfortably operate in conditions ranging from -40 to +50 degrees on the standard scale. Most Council species would require environmental suits for anything outside a 20-degree range. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. A Veltorian representative raised a tentacle. "Surely this is an exaggeration?" "I assure you it is not," the Cerebrix continued. "Furthermore, human baseline body temperature is 37 degrees. They are, by our standards, constantly running what we would consider a fever. Their bodies operate at temperatures that would denote illness in most species." The hologram switched again, this time showing microscopic imagery. "This is the human immune system. It's not merely a defensive mechanism, it's an active military force. Humans coexist with billions of microorganisms, both beneficial and potentially harmful. Their bodies wage constant microscopic warfare that would overwhelm the biological defenses of most Council species within hours." A Draxian military commander stood abruptly. "This cannot be accurate. We encountered human civilians during the border surveys. They seemed fragile, easily fatigued." "Seemed being the operative word," the researcher replied. "Humans have an extraordinary ability to mask their true capabilities. They've evolved sophisticated social behaviors that prioritize appearing non-threatening. But when survival mechanisms activate, as we witnessed in the arena, they transform." The display now showed archived footage from Earth's own databases, which humanity had provided to the Council during initial diplomatic exchanges. Combat sports, extreme athletics, rescue operations. The Council watched in growing alarm as humans threw themselves from aircraft for recreation, scaled sheer cliff faces without safety equipment, and dove into freezing water to save strangers. "This footage shows humans engaging in voluntary risk-taking behavior," the researcher explained. "They deliberately subject themselves to scenarios that trigger their stress responses, not for survival, but for what they term entertainment, or personal growth." A Quilvan representative, a peaceful herbivorous species, made a sound of distress. "They train their bodies for violence as a leisure activity?" "Not just violence," another researcher chimed in, "avortion with cybernetic enhancements. We've analyzed human military history. Conflicts spanning thousands of years. Weapon development. Tactical innovation. They've been refining the art of warfare since before most Council species achieved space flight." The hologram shifted to show human soldiers in various historical periods. Ancient warriors with primitive weapons. Medieval knights in armor. Modern soldiers with advanced technology. The evolution was clear and disturbing. "But here's what truly concerns us," the Vortian continued. "Humans have a documented pattern of becoming more effective under adverse conditions. Their casualties in conflict don't demoralize them. Statistically, they increase aggression and determination. They have a psychological response they call righteous anger, that overrides normal self-preservation instincts." Ambassador Hayes sat in the human delegation box, watching the presentation with mixed feelings. On one hand, he was proud of humanity's resilience. On the other, he could see the fear growing in the chamber. This wasn't how first contact was supposed to go. A hologram appeared showing social structures. Humans form intense emotional bonds with their group members, the Cerebrix researcher explained. They will sacrifice themselves for others, even strangers, even other species. This makes them unpredictable in conflict scenarios. Standard intimidation tactics are ineffective because humans often value abstract concepts like honor or duty over personal survival. The Council's military strategic division presented next. Their simulations were even more alarming. Various conflict scenarios played out on the hologram, showing human forces against different Council militaries. The results were consistent and disturbing. In direct combat, many species possess superior technology or physical advantages, the strategic officer explained. But in prolonged conflicts, human forces consistently prevail through attrition. They adapt rapidly, accept casualties that would break other species' morale, and demonstrate creativity in tactics that our models struggle to predict. This is fear-mongering, a Draxian official protested. One lucky victory doesn't make them invincible warriors. It wasn't luck, Vexmore's voice cut through the chamber. The warlord had insisted on attending despite his doctor's protests. He stood now, leaning on a support cane, his presence commanding attention. I fought that human with every advantage, size, strength, enhancement, training. She beat me because her species refuses to accept defeat. Not because of training or technology. Because of will. He gestured to the hologram showing Katie's medical report. She suffered injuries that would hospitalize a Draxian for weeks. She was treated and released in 2 days. I've reviewed footage of her since the fight. She was back to her normal duties within a week, showing no signs of trauma or hesitation. That's not an anomaly. That's what humans are. The chamber fell silent. Then a Quilvan elder, one of the Council's most respected voices, spoke softly. What are we to do with this information? Are we meant to fear them? Reject their application for membership? Prepare for eventual conflict? No, Hayes said, standing up in the delegation box. All eyes turned to him. If I may address the Council? Chancellor Throckmell nodded permission. Hayes stepped down to the main floor, his movements measured and calm. You've compiled an impressive amount of data about human capabilities. It's all accurate. We are survivors. We are stubborn. We can be dangerous when threatened. But you're missing the most important part of who we are. He pulled up his own hologram showing different footage. Human doctors treating alien patients during the border conflicts. Human engineers helping repair damaged stations after accidents. Human children playing with young members of other species during cultural exchanges. We're also this, Hayes said quietly. We bond with other species. We feel compassion for strangers. We go out of our way to help, to heal, to build. Yes, we can fight. But we'd much rather not. Katie's first action after that match wasn't celebration. It was checking on Vexmore's well-being. That's humanity too. The hologram showed more images. Humans risking their lives to save alien crew members during the mining colony disaster. Human volunteers teaching in refugee settlements. Human artists collaborating with alien musicians. You can fear us, Hayes continued. That's your choice. But we came here offering friendship, and that offer still stands. The strength you saw in that arena? We'd rather use it standing beside you than against you. The Council chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, Chancellor Throckmell's mandibles moved in the gesture his species used for contemplation. The vote on humanity's Council membership is scheduled for 3 months from now, he announced. I suggest we all use that time wisely. 6 months had passed since the arena incident, and the Galactic Council's Grand Assembly Hall had never seen such a crowd. Every seat was filled, every viewing station occupied, every diplomatic channel broadcasting to hundreds of worlds across known space. Today was the day humanity would learn its fate. Katie Morgan sat in the human delegation box, her shoulder fully healed now, though it still ached when station weather systems changed the air pressure. She wore her formal diplomatic uniform, the same one she'd worn that day in the arena, though this one didn't have blood stains or tear marks. Her hands rested calmly in her lap, but inside, her stomach was doing backflips. The past 6 months had been strange. After the fight, she'd become something of an accidental celebrity across the galaxy. Some species viewed her as a hero. Others saw her as a cautionary tale about human unpredictability. A few entrepreneurial aliens had even started selling holographic recordings of the match, which was apparently the galaxy's equivalent of pay-per-view sports. Katie had tried to return to her normal duties, but normal had become impossible. Every diplomatic function she attended drew curious stares. Aliens would approach her, asking to touch her arm or measure her bone density or request interviews about what it felt like to go berserk. She declined most requests politely, though she'd agreed to a few educational presentations about human biology for scientific institutions. Ambassador Hayes had handled the political fallout with skill that bordered on artistry. He'd spent the months meeting privately with council representatives, addressing concerns, building alliances, and slowly shifting the narrative from humans are dangerous to humans are capable allies. It had been exhausting work, but as Katie looked around the chamber now, she could see the results. More friendly faces than fearful ones. More curiosity than suspicion. Chancellor Throckmell called the assembly to order, his ancient voice carrying the weight of his office. Esteemed members of the Galactic Council, we gather today to vote on the application of humanity for full council membership. This decision will shape the future of our galactic community for generations to come. The procedural formalities took nearly an hour. Various representatives stood to speak, some in support of humanity, others expressing reservations. A Quilvan delegate praised human compassion and willingness to help during recent humanitarian crises. A Draxian official noted that while humans were formidable, they'd shown restraint and honor in all interactions. A nervous Centauran representative questioned whether the galaxy was ready for such an unpredictable species. Then Vexmore stood. The chamber fell silent. The warlord had made a remarkable recovery, though he still carried visible scars from the fight. He'd become an unexpected voice in the debate over humanity, and his opinion carried significant weight among the warrior cultures. 6 months ago, I stood in an arena and challenged humanity's worthiness, he began, his voice steady and clear. I believed I understood strength. I believed I understood combat. I believed I knew what separated the worthy from the weak. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. I was wrong about everything. He looked directly at Katie, and she saw something in his expression that looked almost like respect. The human who defeated me was not a warrior by her people's standards. She was not enhanced, not trained for combat, not even particularly athletic. She was, as humans would say, just a regular person doing her job. And yet she fought with a ferocity that I, in all my years of training and enhancement, could not match. Vexmore turned back to the council. But this is not why I support their membership. I support it because of what happened after the fight. When Lieutenant Morgan regained consciousness, her first concern was my welfare. She asked about my injuries before her own. She showed compassion to an enemy who had tried to humiliate her species. That is the humanity we should recognize today. He gestured to a holographic display showing footage from the past 6 months. Human medical teams working alongside alien doctors during an outbreak on the Veltorian colonies. Human engineers helping rebuild infrastructure after the mining disaster on Kepler Station. Human teachers volunteering in refugee settlements across 3 systems. Humans are dangerous, yes, Vexmore continued. But they are dangerous in defense of others as much as themselves. They form bonds across species lines. They feel empathy for beings completely unlike them. They will fight when necessary, but they prefer to build, to heal, to create. The galaxy needs their strength, but it also needs their heart. The speech drew approving sounds from many delegates. Katie felt her throat tighten with emotion. 6 months ago, she'd been terrified in that arena. Now, her opponent had become one of humanity's strongest advocates. Ambassador Hayes spoke next, keeping his remarks brief and heartfelt. We didn't come to the stars looking for conflict. We came looking for friendship, for knowledge, for a place among the community of thinking beings. What happened in the arena wasn't how we wanted to introduce ourselves, but perhaps it showed you who we really are. We're survivors. We're stubborn. We don't quit. But we're also kind. We're curious. We care about others, even strangers, even species we've just met. We're not perfect, but we're trying our best. And we hope that's enough. Chancellor Throckmell initiated the voting sequence. The holographic display showed each species representative as they cast their vote. Green lights for approval. Red for denial. Yellow for abstention. Katie watched the lights appear one by one. Green, green, yellow, green, red, green, green. Her heart pounded with each new vote. The chamber was completely silent except for the soft chime that accompanied each decision. When the final vote registered, the display showed the results. 87 green lights. 12 red lights. 16 yellow lights. Humanity had passed the threshold for membership by a comfortable margin. The chamber erupted in noise. Some species applauded in their various ways. Others made sounds of approval or reservation. The human delegation box exploded with cheers and embraces. Katie found herself being hugged by people she barely knew, her own eyes wet with tears she hadn't expected. Chancellor Throckmell allowed the celebration for a moment before calling for order once more. By the authority vested in this council, I formally recognize humanity as a full member species of the Galactic Council, with all rights, responsibilities and privileges therein. Welcome to the community of stars. The reception afterward was held in one of the council's grand halls. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species mingled, sharing drinks and conversation. Katie found herself standing near a viewing window, looking out at the stars when Vexmore approached. "Congratulations, Ambassador Morgan," he said. She'd been promoted after the vote, a recognition of her unexpected service to humanity's cause. "Thank you, Warlord. And thank you for your speech. It meant a lot. I simply spoke the truth." He paused, then asked, "How is your shoulder?" "Good as new. Doctor said I heal fast. Apparently that's a human thing." "Indeed." Vexmore looked out at the stars as well. "I've been studying human culture these past months. Your species has a saying, 'What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.'" Katie smiled. "We have a lot of sayings like that. We're an optimistic people, I guess. Even when things are terrible, we find ways to keep going. That is what I find most remarkable about your kind. Not your physical capabilities, though they are impressive, but your refusal to give up hope, even in impossible circumstances. The galaxy has known many warrior species, many intelligent species, many technological species. But I think humanity may be our first species of eternal optimists." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, human and alien, former opponents turned allies, looking out at a galaxy that was now, officially, home to both their peoples. "So what happens now?" Katie asked. Vexmore's mandibles moved and what she'd learned was amusement. Now you get to attend council meetings, participate in debates, deal with bureaucratic procedures, and navigate the politics of 100 different species all trying to advance their own agendas while maintaining the appearance of cooperation." Katie groaned. "That sounds awful." "It is," Vexmore agreed. "Welcome to the council." But he was smiling, and so was she, because despite the challenges ahead, despite the unknowns and the difficulties and the inevitable conflicts, humanity had earned its place among the stars. Not through technology or military might, though they had both, but through the same stubborn determination that had carried them from caves to spaceships, the same refusal to quit that had won an impossible fight in an arena 6 months ago. The galaxy had learned an important lesson that day. You could negotiate with humans. You could befriend them. You could trust them. You could even fight them if absolutely necessary. But you should never, ever assume they would give up. Because even when broken, bleeding, and beaten, humans would find a way to stand back up. And they'd do it with a smile, extending a hand in friendship even to those who'd knocked them down. That was humanity's real strength. And the galaxy was about to learn just how powerful that could be.